Hello everyone and welcome to my Prezi. So I couldn't get my audio file to work with Prezi. I actually finished this presentation yesterday and then went to upload it today, double checked to make sure it worked, and half of my audio files weren't working. So as a last ditch effort, I decided to just do a video. So I'm actually taking a video on my phone of me presenting this Prezi, because I figured this is a foolproof way for both the audio and video to work. So I decided to do Duma Key by Stephen King. So I first read this book when it came out in 2008 and borrowed it from my high school library at the time. And I wouldn't say that this is a book that I like, but it is a book that has changed my life, and I'll get a little bit more into that later in the presentation, of course. So a bit of background on the book. Obviously, it's by Stephen King. It was published in January of 2008 by Scribner, and it's actually the first Stephen King book with a Florida/Minnesota setting. So the main character here, Edgar Freemantle, lives in Minnesota, suffers a work accident and has his right arm amputated, along with some other, like a TBI, a traumatic brain injury, a couple other things. He has to learn how to speak again and learn how to walk and drive again. His wife ends up leaving him, and he starts to go to therapy. His therapist suggests that he move away to put some, geographic distance between him and his accident site. So he moves to Florida for a certain time, and decides to do painting, which is a hobby that he liked to do before his right arm was amputated. He starts painting and having psychic visions. He has a vision that his daughter got engaged, and a couple days after that he got a call from his daughter saying that she had gotten engaged. So he starts painting the things that he sees in his visions. He decides to get his art appraised because he starts painting and having dozens of paintings piled up. Gets his art appraised and actually gets a show put together, and people start buying his paintings. When they do that, however, people start either dying or becoming possessed. And I won't kind of spoil the rest of the book for you, but needless to say, it's a Stephen King book, so it's not super happy. But this book impacted me, I would say, specifically with my intellectual development, and it also exposed me to a variety of, I guess, new kinds of books. So development specifically, that'll kind of tie into another portion of the presentation, but this book really helped me to develop my vocabulary, along with kind of problem solving skills, and it also opened my mind to new kinds of books. So prior to this book, I had read adult themed books, and I'd read Edgar Allan Poe and things like that, but this was the first Stephen King book that I read, and so up until this point in my life, I had never read a book that really dealt with such, I guess, dark themes. This book touches on kind of suicidal thoughts, murder, possession, that whole kind of area. It's kind of what Stephen King's known for, of course, but prior to reading this book, I hadn't had any experience with that, and so it really opened my mind to this kind of genre of horror novels. So my initial opinions and feelings. This book was really hard for me to read. So it came out in 2008, so I was 13 at the time. And while I had a pretty big vocabulary, this book is pretty extensive. I'll just show you, so I have the actual book with me right here, and it's pretty massive, pretty thick. It took me about 3 weeks to finish it. as I started to write down summaries of the chapters and using a dictionary for the books, or for the words that I didn't understand. So I picked this book to be a book report for my high school freshman year English class. We had to like pick a book that we hadn't read, but we had to pick it just based on what the cover looked like and something that we thought would be interesting based on the cover. So, I chose this one because this book, if you can kind of see here, it has kind of a holographic cover to it. And I picked that because I thought that was neat. Did not understand or realize that it was so difficult. So now, so this isn't a book I would say which aligns with my initial thoughts and feelings about the book. But when I first started reading the book, I didn't understand it, and now, years later, I do. I've read it since then, of course, too, and so now it makes a lot more sense to me. um, so I managed to finish this book, like I said, by looking at the dictionary and writing down chapter summaries to try to motivate myself to finish. And this book was really the first book to challenge me intellectually in that way. Like, I had never really had to take time reading a book. I just kind of blew through books and immediately understood them and immediately understood the words and phrases and everything. So this was really the first book to kind of challenge me. And so I loved it, of course, for that reason. Didn't really love the book itself. The topic is pretty dark, and it's a little too long for me. I want to say that, it took me about 3 weeks to read it, but even if I hadn't stopped to make chapter summaries, this book still probably would have taken me a couple days. And I don't typically like to spend that long reading just one thing. But since reading this book, I have been reading Stephen King novels ever since. The Shining is one of my favorite novels, along with Carrie. But yeah, so this book did change my life, definitely. It was the first book to really challenge me intellectually, and it really opened my eyes to this whole horror genre beyond, kind of the Edgar Allan Poe, just kind of spooky story thing. This book was more of a psychological kind of build up to the end, which I won't spoil, but it was really a psychological, and I hadn't read a book like that before. And so, yeah, this is the book that changed my life.